In this video, I'm going to be spending 100 days in fighting type only Pixelmon. So of course, I loaded in and only had two choices for my starters. That of course would be Torchic and Chimchar. My rival Hawk decided that he wanted to take the Chimchar, so of course I decided to take the Torchic. Blaziken is one of my favorite fighting type starters, so I'm super excited to use this guy in this 100 days. Me and Hawk then decided to have a little battle where I ended up defeating Hawk pretty easily with over half of my HP still on my Torchic. I then opened up a bunch of random Pokemon papers where I ended up getting myself a Mienshao, which of course is a fighting type Pokemon, meaning I'd be able to use it. I then checked out the IVs of both my Pokemon, with my Mienshao having only 37% IVs, and my Torchic having 94% IVs, which was crazy. I then headed over to the fusion area, where I found a fighting type fusion between Blaziken and Tapu Koko, called Blazicoco. And you guys already know I have to get this fusion Pokemon to fuse with my starter. I then headed over to the level grinder, where I ended up evolving my Torchic up into a Combusken, and my Combusken into a shiny Blaziken. And although the shiny doesn't look that good, it was still a Blaziken nonetheless, so I was super happy with this guy. I then decided to head out into the wild to try and find my third fighting type Pokemon. So I RTP'd out into a forest biome. Now, there was a massive lake around me, which was perfect for the Pokemon I wanted to catch. But eventually, I finally found the Pokemon I wanted, and that of course was a Poliwag. Now that I had the Poliwag, I decided it would be a great idea to head back over to the boss tower to grind a little bit of money and level up my Pokemon at the same time, where I ended up fighting things like this boss Drapion, which was super difficult, and Pokemon like this super powerful Chesnaught. It was such a high level compared to the rest of my Pokemon, so it was difficult for me to take down half these bosses. But eventually, after taking down a couple bosses, I finally evolved my Poliwag into a Poliwhirl. Then from Poliwhirl up into a Poliwrath. Obviously, I could have evolved it into a Politoed, but that wouldn't be a fighting type. So Poliwrath was my only option here. And the way he puffs out his chest is such a cool animation. I love this guy. Now, I decided to head back out and RTP into a Dark Oak Forest. Now, the reason for this was because I wanted to catch myself a Shroomish. Now, to find this Shroomish, I needed it to be nighttime, and it was a pretty uncommon spawn. So I had to wait around a little while until eventually it finally spawned on me. I then continued looking around in this extreme hills biome, where I ended up finding myself a Meditite, which of course evolves into a Medicham. And that is exactly what I found next. A Mega Boss Medicham of legendary level. And I kid you not, this thing was so difficult to defeat. At level 97, when my highest Pokemon's a 57, there was no way I was defeating this thing. So I got completely destroyed, and my entire team was defeated in one hit by this insane Medicham boss. I then waited till daytime, where I ended up having a Machoke spawn. Of course, Machamp, the iconic Generation 1 fighting type Pokemon. This guy is awesome, and I had to catch him. After heading into Ultra Space, there were a bunch of raid dens for me to defeat. So I defeated a bunch of them and got a bunch of really good loot. Most importantly though, the XP candies, which I'd be able to use to evolve my Pokemon. Now, I continued exploring around, and I could not believe it. I had a Pheromosa spawn on me, which of course is an Ultra Beast Pokemon. So of course, I ended up catching the Pheromosa, as it is a bug fighting type Pokemon, meaning I'd be able to add it to my team. I then got a bit bored of Ultra Space, so I headed home and used the level grinder with my new high-level Pheromosa to get a bunch of XP for my team. And with all the leveling, my Shroomish evolved into a Breloom. I then headed to this giant hill where Hawk wanted to build a base, and it was a Toxicroak that spawned. So I stole it from behind him, thinking I was hilarious, but it turns out that he also has a Toxicroak. So I didn't really do anything. I then had a great Lucky Block. So I said to Hawk, why don't we use this great Lucky Block to see who wins in a rival battle? So the winner would get the Lucky Block to open for themselves. Me and Hawk then entered the battle, but unfortunately, after a pretty hard battle, Hawk ended up defeating me and getting the Lucky Block for himself. So we decided to build a little house on top of this mountain. I accidentally fell off the mountain, and I could not believe my eyes. When I was about to swim back up, I heard a Poliwag. And what do you know? It had sparkles. It was a shiny Poliwag, meaning I'd be able to get myself a shiny Poliwrath, which was awesome. Eventually, though, I had finally completed our fighting dojo house. I was super happy with how it looked, with a little lake outside, a bunch of greenery, a bunch of trees, some bamboo, And then after you enter the house, we had some punching bags, a little sofa, and Hawk had made these hilarious little triple monitor gaming setups. If you want to check out the full tour, make sure to go check out his video as he shows the entire thing off and has a funny voiceover for it too. After all the messing about, I then decided to take my Pheromosa and level up my entire team in the level area. I eventually had my Poliwag evolve into a Poliwhirl, and then I continued leveling as much as possible to get my team to the highest level, which of course is level 100. Now that I had a full team of level 100s, I created a Nether portal and headed into the Nether, as there was a certain legendary Pokemon that I wanted to catch. So I started digging out a massive area in the Nether until I had a Mega Houndoom boss spawn on me. Once again, this was going to be a difficult challenge, but luckily I had a level 100 team and I managed to defeat the boss Houndoom, getting me some awesome rewards, including a Mega Stone and a Keystone so I'd be able to Mega Evolve more Pokemon, but more importantly, a Master Ball, which was huge, especially for the Pokemon that I wanted to catch next. I then witnessed Hawk murdering a shiny Ghastly, which was madness. A Gengar is a shiny, especially if it Mega'd would have been so cool. Although it wasn't a fighting type, so I can sort of understand why he murdered it. But then we finally had it after days of waiting on a platform, the Marshadow spawn. I used the Master Ball that I'd gotten from my Mega Boss Houndoom and caught myself a Marshadow. My team was starting to look very good. I was then just running around my base, just doing random stuff. Me and Hawk were a little bit bored. And then I came across two Jangamos. And when they evolve, they become a very, very strong dragon fighting type in Comma-O. So I obviously had to catch myself both of these to see which one was better. I then AFK'd for a little bit longer, where I ended up having a Riolu spawn on me. And if you guys are a big fan of the channel, you'll know that my favorite Pokemon, of course, is Lucario. I then took both my new Pokemon and headed over to the level grinder, where I ended up evolving my Jangamo all the way up to a Hakamo, and then a Hakamo into a Kommo. And I might be completely butchering those names, and I apologize if I am. I then headed over to the fusion chamber and checked out all of the different possible fighting type fusions that I could make. But there was also an Urshifu Rayquaza, which was called Rayshifu, which looked so cool. But I didn't think I'd be able to get myself both an Urshifu and a Rayquaza. And of course, like I said before, I was thinking about creating the Blazer Coco fusion. Me and Hawk then built one fighting type team each, headed over to the move relearner and made our teams as strong as possible, giving them the best possible moves. The reason for this is because we wanted to enter the War Zone. War Zone is basically an area where a load of high-level Pokemon spawn, and there's a super high chance that a legendary Pokemon will spawn too. But the only catch here is, if you end up getting into a battle with another player, if you lose that battle, they are able to steal one of your Pokemon, which is devastating. So you got to be very careful when heading in here. Whilst in the war zone, Hawk engaged in a battle with another player. He instantly told me that I had to hurry over to him. And I was so confused on why, but then I realized it was because a Necrozma had spawned on him. Which of course isn't actually a fighting type Pokemon, but I knew I had to head over there and catch it for myself just to stop any other players from catching it. After me and Hawk both got out of the war zone, we then decided to have a rival battle. Now, with this rival battle, we had another Lucky Block on the line. This time, it was an Ultra Ball Lucky Block, so it would spawn a legendary Pokemon. So I knew I had to try and win this one, because if I was able to get a fighting type legendary, my team would be unstoppable against Hawk. Luckily though, I managed to prevail and beat him in the battle, meaning I won an Ultra Ball Lucky Block. Now it's time to open this bad boy and see what we get. And I could not believe it! It upgraded to a Master Ball Lucky Block. I could not believe my luck. But it was time to open it, and we got ourselves a shiny Ho-Oh. Unfortunately though, the shiny Ho-Oh is not a Pokemon that we can use because of course it's not a fighting type. But it's still pretty cool anyway. Now after catching the shiny Ho-Oh, I wanted to show it off to Hawk, but he was not having any of it. He was so mad that I beat him. Me and Hawk then had a little discussion, and we decided to do a little challenge for a fusion key. Because we both wanted to make a fusion on the server with one of our fighting type Pokemon, so we decided to make it into a little game. Basically, the rules of the game are, we have a certain amount of time to catch as many fighting type Pokemon as we possibly can. And whoever catches the most Pokemon wins the challenge and wins themselves a fusion key. So of course, it was time to head out and find as many fighting type Pokemon as possible. Luckily, we lived around an extreme hills biome, meaning it was home to so many fighting type Pokemon. For example, like this Hitmonchan, we have Hitmonlee, Machop, Makuhita, Mienfoo. There's so many different fighting type Pokemon. We didn't count duplications though. So for example, if you'd already caught yourself a Machop, you couldn't then go and catch yourself a Machoke and count it as 2 different Pokemon. That would still only count as 1. So I caught up all the Pokemon I could possibly find, and by the time we made it back, we both placed down a sign and then did a countdown and showed how many Pokemon we had caught. Hawk had caught 4 and I had caught 6. So I was the winner and got myself a fusion key, meaning I'd be able to create the fusion that I wanted in Blazer Coco. But of course, I didn't actually have the Blazer Coco yet because I needed to get a Tapu Koko. So I RTP'd into loads of different biomes and ended up defeating raid dens on my way to find a jungle biome, which is where Tapu Koko spawns. I defeated this Grotto raid den, which gave me some pretty good XP candies to level up my team, and this Electrode raid den, which gave me a wishing piece and more red candies, meaning if I found another raid den, I'd be able to do more raid den battles. Eventually, though, I finally came across a jungle biome. I searched for days looking for this Tapu Koko, but I luckily did find something else in place of that, and that was a Mega Boss Sceptile. Obviously, this Pokemon as a Mega is a Grass Dragon type, which isn't the fighting type that we would need, but it's still cool to take on and defeat. Eventually, after a long time of exploring, the Tapu Koko finally spawned on me, and I ended up catching it. Now, there was only one more thing to do, and that was to take my Blaziken and my Tapu Koko over to the fusion machine, add in the fusion key, and create Blazer Coco. Now, he was such a cool Pixelmon fusion, and I was so happy to have him on my team. There was no chance that Hawk was going to defeat me now. I then headed back to my base, waiting for Hawk to come back on, and then a Mega Boss Lucario spawned. Now, this is amazing because I already have my Lucario, and I have a Mega Ring because I defeated the Mega Bosses previously, meaning all I had to do now was defeat this Mega Boss, get myself a Lucario Knight, and then I'd be able to Mega Evolve my Lucario, giving my team an even more power boost to take on Hawk in our next rival battle. So I Mega Evolved my Lucario, and he looked amazing. I'm so happy that I finally got my favorite Pokemon as a Mega. I then headed over to the EV trainer as I wanted to EV train all of my Pokemon to make them as strong as possible. After I'd perfectly trained them all in their EVs, I headed back to the level grinder to continue leveling my entire team up to level 100. And you might be wondering, I've already done this, so why am I leveling them again? Well, I'm leveling a different team to level 100 as I want to go back into the war zone soon, but I don't want to risk using my super amazing fighting type team just yet. There's also a feature on the server called the Battle Pass. Now, with this, the longer you play and the more that you do, you'll unlock more stages on the Battle Pass. Now, I didn't know about this until now, so I headed on there and claimed all of the stuff I possibly could, getting me a common Lucky Block and an uncommon Lucky Block. And when I went out to use them, a shiny Mienfoo spawned, which was mad because that is a fighting type, which means I'm going to be able to catch it and have a shiny Pokemon on my team. I then decided to open up my Lucky Blocks, where I ended up getting his fighting type Passimian, which I probably wouldn't use, but is still another fighting type Pokemon to add to the team. And also opening the Great Ball Lucky Block, I got a shiny Cofagrigus, which unfortunately isn't a fighting type, it is a ghost type, but it's still pretty cool to have. By the time I'd done all of this, Hawk was now back online and ready for our rival battle. So we headed into the battle, and of course, with these rival battles, there is a Lucky Block on the line. Now, of course, last time it was an Ultra Ball Lucky Block, so this time, we have put on the line a Master Ball Lucky Block. I thought I had this in the bag, you know, with my Mega Lucario, my Pheromosa, my Marshadow. I didn't bring my fusion Pokemon to this battle because I didn't think it was quite fair yet. And I wanted Hawk to have a fusion as well, so that when we had our last battle, it would be a little bit more fair. Hawk ended up beating me. I underestimated his team by so much. I didn't think that he'd have such a powerful team, but he did. So Hawk opened up the Master Ball Lucky Block and got himself a shiny Latias, which is awesome to see, but luckily for me, he can't use it because it's not a fighting type, so I don't have to worry about that in our next rival battle. After Hawk caught his shiny legendary, I sat him down on the sofa and I showed off my shiny Mienfoo. We decided that what we would do is have another challenge race. The first person that was able to find a shiny Pokemon and bring it back to the house would win any Pokemon they want. So we rushed over to the war zone to try and find a shiny Pokemon as the odds are increased in there. Unfortunately though, the only thing I ended up finding was a legendary Spectria. I continued exploring as much as possible trying to find this shiny Pokemon, where I ended up defeating a Mega Kangaskhan boss and a Mega Steelix boss. Gave me some pretty good loot and some Mega Stones. I then also came across this amazing 5-star raid den for this Zoroark. I did not think I was going to defeat it. But luckily, with the help of my Mega Lucario, I was able to prevail and defeat the raid. But after I completed it, there was no time to wait, as I noticed a shiny Pokemon in the corner of my screen. And that, of course, was a shiny Scorbunny. So I quickly caught it as fast as I could and then headed back to base. And after opening the door, I didn't see Hawk anywhere. So I thought that I had won. But when I turned around, he jumped off the ceiling as he was hiding up there from me because he had already caught a shiny Shelder, meaning that he had won the challenge. I was devastated. I could not believe it. I for sure thought that I had won this. But he'd won, and he'd now gotten his legendary of his pick. Now, of course, he was going to pick himself a fighting-type legendary, and the Pokemon he decided to pick was a Galarian Zapdos, which is an absolute powerhouse. I was so jealous of this Pokemon. But I was also happy for him because he would need it against my fusion Pokemon and my Ultra Beast. So we'll see what happens in our next fight. Now, to prepare for this next fight, I need to get a bunch of held items on my Pokemon. So I headed over to the boss tower and defeated as many boss Pokemon as I possibly could, because the more I defeat them, the more money I get and the more boss drops I get. So if I don't get the held item I need straight away, I can just buy it afterwards. Eventually, I'd gotten all of the held items I needed, including Toxic Orbs, Life Orbs, and even Leftovers. Now, we entered in, and I was sure that I was going to win. I brought my fusion with me this time, so I was very confident on this win. And of course, like the other rival battles, we had a Lucky Block on the line. Now, I won't spoil what Lucky Block this is, but if you can guess which Lucky Block we're about to open, make sure to put it in the comments and don't cheat. And don't be cheating because you'll see it very soon. After we finally finished the battle, I ended up defeating Hawk with only my Breloom left. The legendary Breloom. I was so happy that he survived this, meaning I would get to open this Lucky Block. Now, if you guys did guess the correct Lucky Block, it of course was the God Lucky Block, which spawns 3 legendary Pokemon that can be either fusions, legendaries, or even custom textured legendaries. So I was ready to open up the God Lucky Block. Here we go. Come on. And I managed to get some awesome Pokemon, including a Landorus, a Galaxy Tapu Lele, and a Shadow Arceus. As you can see in the chat, everyone just exploded. They were all like, please let me TP. We need to see this. God Lucky Blocks don't get opened often, and this was awesome to see. I then felt really bad for Hawk after catching my Pokemon, so I decided to let him catch the Landorus. But his balls just went straight through the Landorus, because with the Lucky Blocks, only the person that opens them can actually catch them, which is an awesome feature, meaning that no one will ever steal your Pokemon. But I did find it quite funny because he really wanted to steal that Landorus from me. I then decided to head over to the gyms, where I ended up taking them out pretty quickly, as I have an awesome team now that are full of super strong Pokemon. So I defeated the Electric Gym with no issues, then I took on the Dragon Gym and also managed to take that one down pretty quickly. After defeating the Dragon-type gym leader, I was pretty happy with my team and with how I was performing, so I decided to continue and take on the Dark Gym, which I ended up defeating as well. The only problem was when I came up against the ground gym, I had a lot of issues with that gym and got defeated. So I took a little break, and when I came back to the base, Hawk showed me that he managed to catch an Urshifu, which I was super jealous of. He now had 2 fighting-type legendary Pokemon. So I said to Hawk, how about we search and try and find me a Kubfu and make it an Urshifu as well? And he was happy to do so. So we headed out on a journey and ended up finding a bamboo forest. Now, if you guys know much about Pixelmon spawns, you'll know that you need to clear out a massive flat area for them to have the best chances of spawning. So we destroyed all of the bamboo that we possibly could, until eventually I finally had the Kubfu spawn on me, getting me my legendary fighting type Pokemon. Now, when we got back to base, we realized obviously that I would have to evolve mine to an Urshifu. But since Hawk had the water type one, I decided to go for the dark type Urshifu, so that I'd be able to rival him somewhat. We came up with a plan to fly around on both of our legendaries to try and find an Urshifu tower. And after a long time of traveling, we came across the correct Urshifu tower. We came across the dark type Urshifu tower, which of course is the one that we were looking for. So I headed up to the flag at the top of the building and threw out my Kubfu, who evolved into an Urshifu. I decided to grab out both my Scorbunny and my Urshifu and head over to the level grinder to level them up to level 100. Now, I decided, because I already had a Cinderace and now I've got an Urshifu, I wanted to use both of them. So I headed over to the fusion machine and decided I wanted to fuse them both together. Coincidentally though, Hawk was already there, so I had to watch him create the exact same fusion that I was about to make. But we both sat there while we created both of our fusion Pokemon, which of course is Cindershifu. Such a cool Pokemon. Luckily for me though, I now had 2 fusion fighting type Pokemon on my team, so I figured for sure I was going to win our next rival fight. But I need to learn not to underestimate Hawk. I did get defeated by taking his team for granted. We headed back to the home and jumped on top of 2 of the tallest trees we could find and headed into our rival battle. Like I said before, I was so confident that I was going to win this. With my Mega, my 2 fusion Pokemons, my Ultra Beast, my legendary Marshadow, I thought that I had this fight in the bag. But unfortunately, I ended up losing to a glitch, which I was devastated about. But it is what it is. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. GG's, Hawk.